Tom Tipper is the postman at Farquhar and one of the friendliest faces you can find in the village. Everyone knows Tom and his little red van and will always stop to say hello to him. It's not just the village residents who like Tom, he is a good friend to the railway too. Early each morning, he meets Percy with the mail train and helps load the mail sacks into the waiting vans. The little engine adores Tom and is always happy to see him. However, one morning, as Percy arrived at the station with the mail train, Tom Tipper was nowhere to be seen. Instead, there stood a miserable-looking postman. He dumped the sacks on the platform and cycled away without a word. "Where's Tom?" worried Percy. "And his little van?" "No wonder the new lad looks miserable," murmured his driver, "having to cycle around all day with mail sacks." "I'm sure we'll see him again soon," added the fireman. But Percy wasn't so sure and began to worry. He met Toby later that day and explained what had happened. Toby looked worried too. "I saw the new chap earlier myself. Something must be up for him to not have Tom's van." And indeed it was. A few days later, Tom was back at work, however this time with a new bicycle. "Where's your van?" asked Percy. "They say it's too expensive to run," sighed Tom. "The bike's a cheaper alternative. I'm sorry I can't stay and help. I've got to try and keep to time." And with that, Tom cycled sadly away. Percy felt very upset for him. Later that evening, he spoke with Toby again. "It's such a shame," murmured Toby. "He looked ever so unhappy when I saw him earlier." "I do wish there was something we could do to help," sighed Percy. But try as the two engines might, they couldn't think of anything which would help. "Never mind," comforted Toby. "I'm sure something will come to us soon." Percy remained doubtful and drifted unhappily to sleep. Little did he know how soon something would come. Next morning, Percy was at the station. He left the vans at the platform as he went to take on water. As he did, Tom Tipper arrived, red in the face from cycling. He left the sacks on the platform and went to hurry away. But before he could, he was stopped. "There's a call for you in my office," called the station master. "It sounds urgent." "Oh, botheration," grumbled Tom. "I'll be even later now." Hastily, Tom propped his bike against one of Percy's vans as he hurried into the station office. As he went, Percy backed down onto his waiting vans, but neither he or his crew noticed the lone bike. That is until they heard a loud crunch. "What was that?" gasped Percy. His crew leaped onto the platform and quickly found the source of the noise. "Where on earth did that come from?" asked the driver. Tom's bike laid in a tangled heap below the wheels of the first van. Percy was most upset. "Oh, I'm sorry. I had no idea." "It's all right, Percy," reassured his driver. "It was just an accident. None of us knew it was there." By now they were running late. Percy puffed sadly away, feeling terrible about the whole ordeal. At midday, Percy arrived at a station where Toby was waiting. Before either could speak to another, they heard a joyful noise. "It's Tom's van!" cheered Percy. Tom came rolling up beside the engines, tooting the little van's horn with delight. Gone with his long face, he now glowed cheerfully as he once did. "They've let me have my old van back," he smiled happily. The engine smiled, but Percy was still worried. "I'm sorry about your bike, Tom." "It's all right, Percy. I never liked it anyways," he beamed. "Besides, this is much better." Toby grinned. "It seems you helped out after all." "I suppose so," replied Percy. "Although it was by accident. A happy accident, you might say." Everyone laughed, and the two little engines watched happily as Tom Tipper and his little van rumbled away.
Duck, the Great Western Engine, runs his own branch line by the coastline with a fellow Western engine named Oliver. The two of them are set in their ways and do their best to run their line efficiently as possible. However, they don't always agree on everything. One sunny and crisp afternoon, Duck was waiting for Oliver's connection train at the station. He wasn't waiting long as he spotted Dulcie, one of Oliver's coaches, backing towards the platform. But when the train stopped, Duck was displeased to see Oliver in the middle of his coaches. "I've told you about this before. You'll have an accident if you keep hiding between Dulcie and Isabel," he huffed. Oliver rolled his eyes. "Would you calm down? The girls keep a good lookout for me, and driver knows what he's doing." "All the same, you know how unpredictable a railway can be. A good lookout isn't always enough," remarked Duck. "Oh, really? Well, I'll be sure to ask Isabel to keep an eye out for any oncoming barber shops," said Oliver smugly. The coaches giggled. Duck wheezed steam crossly and set off once the guard blew his whistle. The main line was going through some extensive maintenance, and ballast was an essential part of the operation. The Fat Controller had assigned Donald and Douglas to collect and deliver the ballast from the Little Western. As usual, the ballast trucks were being a bother. "Up and down the branch line, being hauled by number 9, biff bash, bish bash, we must slow down," they sang as they slammed their buffers into the back of Donald. "Heard your waist," snapped Donald, bumping them fiercely. That did the trick. The trucks strained the coupling after the bump, and 3 of them broke away with the brake van, but neither Donald or his crew were aware. The guard climbed out of his van and went to find a telephone. The trucks cackled to themselves as they obstructed the line. They weren't laughing, however, when they heard an engine coming. Oliver was coming down the line, still in between his coaches. Dulcie rang her bell frantically when she spotted the trucks. Oliver's driver was alerted right away and applied Oliver's brakes from Dulcie's cab. Oliver tried his best to stop, but poor Dulcie bumped into the guard's van. Nobody was hurt, but the passengers and crew were irate. "I thought Donald knew how to handle his trucks. Now what are we supposed to do?" fumed Oliver. "We'll push them to the junction station. We can leave them in a siding there, and Donald can come back and collect them later," decided his driver. It was hard work having to push the trucks and coaches, but Oliver arrived at the station and placed them in the siding. The guard, who had ridden in the brake van, thanked Oliver and went to talk to the station master about contacting Donald. Oliver set off with his train, leaving the trucks all by themselves. Suddenly, the trucks felt themselves rolling slowly backwards. The rough riding with Donald and the bump from Dulcie had damaged their brakes, and now they couldn't hold their weight. "Faster! Faster!" they whispered excitedly as they began to roll out of the siding. The guard saw this from the platform and ran towards his van. But it was no good. The trucks were now moving down the line. Then came trouble. Duck was puffing up the line with Alice and Mirabelle. He saw the trucks and whistled an alarm. "Stop! Stop!" he cried as the trucks hurtled towards him. Duck braked hard, but the trucks hit him hard and forced him backwards. With much determination and dropping of sand, Duck came to a stop. His guard went to check on the passengers while his crew inspected him and the trucks. Donald's guard came running down the line. His face was bright crimson and he was out of breath. "Lost something?" asked the fireman sarcastically. Poor Duck's brakes had locked and he was rather shaken from the collision. Douglas took his passengers on to the next station while Oliver came to help Duck to the works. "You were right, Duck. The railway can be an unpredictable place," said Oliver sympathetically. Duck sighed and looked at his sore buffers. "Still, suppose it's better than being hit with a barber shop." I reckon you won't be keen on running in the middle of your own train in future, Oliver chuckled quietly. And that was something Oliver and Duck could agree on.
Mavis, the diesel engine, lives and works at the quarry. She's a hard worker and spends her days busily shunting the trucks full of stone into their proper sidings. Sometimes, she is even allowed to bring trucks down to the top station. Mavis likes this best of all, as she finds the quarry quite confining. She is, however, still quite young, and can sometimes get carried away. One morning, she had brought some trucks down the line, and was refueling at the station. Toby was idling nearby. "It is nice coming down the line sometimes," smiled Mavis gaily. "I'm glad Manager allowed me." "It is nice to see you out in the open," agreed Toby cheerfully. "You know," Mavis went on, "I'd like to move on from the quarry one day. It gets ever so dull up there. I could be much more useful down here instead." Toby smirked. He knew what Mavis was like. "Oh really? I don't think your manager would like that. Who would shunt the trucks for me?" Mavis huffed. "You can jolly well shunt them yourself. I'm bored of that silly place. I should be allowed to work elsewhere." She flounced away without another word. Toby watched her go, chuckling quietly to himself as she did. Toby wasn't the only one who had watched Mavis that day. A cow had broken free of her field earlier in the day. It had wandered down towards the line after she saw Mavis rattle past with her trucks. Standing on the track bed, the cow found plenty of nice grassy patches to eat. "Now for lunch," she thought to herself, as she happily set about chomping. Mavis was still grumbling as she headed back up the tramway. Not fair, she muttered. "Daft old Toby, rotten old quarry." Her thoughts were quickly interrupted when she saw what was up ahead. "Brakes, driver!" she called as she slowed. But the trucks had other ideas. They were tired of Mavis's grumbling and wanted to have some fun. On, they chanted stupidly as they surged forwards. Mavis was surprised, but she was also wiser to the trucks. With skillful braking, she controlled the truck's speed, but not quite well enough. She stopped just too late. Her cow catchers bumped into the startled cow, nudging it forwards. "Silly thing," cried Mavis. "Get a move on you." She gave a loud blast of her horn to drive the point home. The cow was surprised and hurried forward, but to Mavis's dismay, stayed between the rails. "What a nuisance," fussed Mavis with another honk. "We'll have to shoo it along the line, I suppose," called the driver. Mavis thought so too, and so, inching carefully along, with regular soundings of a horn, she set off, shooing the cow along the line. At last they spotted the broken fence and Father Desmond nearby. He had heard Mavis's horn and came to see what the matter was. "Oh, there she is," he cried happily. "Oh, thank you, Mavis. What a kindness. I'm indebted to you." Mavis couldn't help but blush at that. "Could make a farmer out of you, we could," added the farmer with a laugh. "Unfortunately, we've a quarry to get back to," replied the driver. So with one last toot of a horn, Mavis set off again. Later that day, Toby arrived at the quarry. "I hear you helped our farmer," he said. "Yes, indeed," said Mavis proudly. "I told you I could be useful elsewhere." "You really will be moving on, won't you?" winked Toby. "Although not very far from home, it seems." Mavis pretended she hadn't heard, and scuttled away to fetch Toby's trucks.
Thomas the Tank Engine adores running his own branch line. He and his two faithful coaches, Annie and Clarabelle, know everyone on the line and everyone knows them. One morning, Thomas arrived at the top station of his branch line with a pasture train. He sizzled warmly in the sunshine as people climbed in and out of the coaches. As he was dozing, he overheard his crew talking to the guard. "Hey up, where's the station master this morning?" asked the driver. "Haven't you heard? His house was broken into last night," replied the guard. Not only did they steal his gardening trophies, but his new car. He is currently with the police giving a statement. Everyone was shocked. You mean that red car he's always going on about? Inquired the fireman. The guard nodded sadly. Poor station master, sighed Thomas. Soon, it was time to leave. The guard climbed into Clarabelle, blew his whistle, and waved his green flag. Thomas set off back down the line, thinking about the station master and the thieves. Thieves on the line, what shall we do? Thieves on the line, what shall we do? Sang Annie and Clarabelle mournfully. Thomas had reached the tunnel. He had just passed through when he spotted a flash of red on the road. That's strange, thought Thomas. I'm normally first to this station before Bertie. Thomas wanted to get a better look at the red vehicle, but his driver held him back. Settle down, Thomas. We're not racing Bertie if that's what you're thinking. I don't think that's Bertie, driver, puffed Thomas. The fireman peered out of the cab. It isn't Bertie. I can't tell who it is, though. The driver advanced the regulator slowly, and Thomas drew level with the car. Thomas squinted his eyes. He didn't recognize the two men in the car at all. The two men seemed to panic when they spotted the train and sped up. Thomas then realized what was going on and whistled loudly. Stop! Thieves! He called out. Thomas tried his hardest to keep up with the thieves, but he knew the road wouldn't run alongside his rails for long. Then, the driver had an idea. There's a signal box up ahead. We'll write a message for the signalman and throw it from my lunchbox. So the fireman wrote on a piece of paper to alert the signalman of the thieves and place it inside the lunchbox. Then the driver eased on Thomas's speed as they approached the signal box. Thomas blew his whistle as loud as he could as the fireman chucked the lunchbox onto the stairs of the box. Police! Shouted the crew and coaches as they passed. The signalman ran out of his box when he heard the commotion and grabbed the lunchbox. The thieves had turned off the main road so Thomas couldn't see them anymore. Everyone hoped the signalman got the message in time. The signalman did and promptly rang the police. The police then intercepted the thieves and stopped them at a roadblock. At the next station, Thomas's crew were informed of the thieves' capture and were most relieved. The next day, the Fat Controller broke a journey down to the branch line for a small celebration. The station master had been reunited with his car and trophies, which the police found in the boot of the car. He then thanked Annie, Clarabelle, Thomas and his crew for all their help. The Fat Controller then stood on top of a trolley and raised his hand for silence. I am delighted that my railway was able to play a part in dealing out swift justice on these crimes. I have never been prouder of my staff, and of course, Thomas and his two faithful coaches, smiled the Fat Controller. Everyone applauded. Thomas just blushed brightly and wished happily.